All right, let's make sure we're all set up. And I don't have anything planned today, but I am going to go through. I've been really slacking on my YouTube channel questions and answers on my notifications here, so I'm just going to go through that. And of course, if you guys have any questions, feel free to shout them out here. Let's make sure that I got the right name here. Let's copy and paste.
Doc?
Yes, we're good. Okay. So, like I mentioned before, we can go through here and I can just look at my YouTube channel and see if there's anything on here we can talk about. So right up here at the top we have Control D starts regular divisions and Shift D and D cycle through them, but if you don't have subdivisions, then Shift D and D only cycle through dynamic subdivisions or preview divisions. Is that correct? And yes, that is. And I highly suggest, we'll grab a cylinder 3D out of here, go into edit mode, and then if we turn on polyframe, and we go up here to make polymesh 3D, we have this object here. And it's a lot easier if you can go through here. And one thing I like to use a lot is polygroups and then group by normals. And also I like to use my custom menu here. And let's go ahead, just so I can show you guys where some resources are at really quickly. If you go to my YouTube playlist channel, there's a nope, not that one. ZBrush radiation full playlist, and if you go through here, you're going to see there's like 50 or almost, yeah, 55. Well, you know what? There's 55. I wasn't able to put in, there's a big gap in here because I wasn't able to put in some ZBrush 2019 stuff that was new and should be in that playlist. So if you want to, also go to the ZBrush 2019 playlist, and that'll be some new stuff in 2019. And I wanted to include these 4 folder ones right here. We can talk about folders too real quick. But that's a resource for you. So the cool thing about polygroups and the reason why I like them so much is because you can use these to enable you to do stuff like if I want to go ahead and say QMesh polygroup all, or you know what, let's do an inset polygroup all. You can just grab these polygroups and inset them, and usually I'll just do a region here. So, and this is your Z modeler brush, BZM, and then we can go through here and they say maybe QMesh polygroup all, hold down Shift, and then let's go in here and say insert multiple edge loops. Now when I do something like this, insert multiple edge loops, interactive elevation, let me pull this out and kind of round this off a little bit. And now I go back down here, when we do our group by normals, you're going to see these don't get picked up is because the angle threshold for this right here is less than 45. So what we need to do to pick those up is actually go down here and drop this down. Oops, not crease. Polygroups, group by normals, max angle. So now if you keep dragging this down, eventually it'll pick up that angle change. Now if you drag it down too far, it's going to grab a lot of things. So kind of pick exactly where that is. Now of course you can also just go through here, hold down Alt, and just tag these. You can isolate that, Control Shift, and then tap it. Hey guys, thanks for showing up. It's been a while since I've done a recording here. So what we're doing here is I'm just going through my YouTube channel, my notifications, and just kind of answering some questions there. And what we're talking about here is D and Shift D. And why this is so important is if you ever want to do hard surface modeling and you want to see what the preview is. So if I go down here, one thing I like to do is, so crease level is set to 3, and then dynamic smooth subdiv is set to 4. And what that's going to do is it's going to subdivide, quote unquote, just a preview subdivision up to 3 times, and then it's going to uncrease everything and then turn the smooth subdiv up to 4. So you can actually start smoothing these out. If you go to crease level of 2 and then do Shift D and D, that'll even round it out even more. So with that, you're able to go back here, see your preview, and then you can always do Shift D to turn that off, and then you can go through here and do stuff like polygroup, polyloop. We'll grab this one, and then we'll say maybe, we can even go through here and we'll say insert single edge loop. We'll hold down Alt and get rid of these, and then we'll just do another inset polygroup here, and then we'll do a QMesh polygroup all, and then we can hold down Shift if you want to pull along those surface normals, or if you want to just QMesh in and out, that's available to you as well. So then we can go ahead and hit D, and now these aren't creased. You're getting a very nice fall off here. You can manually go through and you can say crease edge loop complete, like so, or you can do a crease. Hold on. You can do a crease PG, which will crease all your polygroups there, but it doesn't stop you from doing anything like, oh, I want to do an insert mesh brush. And go to brush insert. I don't know, Boolean something or other, and go ahead and insert these things out, and then you can split them off. Where that gets not so good is if I go over here to dynamic and I hit apply, that gives me real subdivisions here. But now if I want to go through, I can't add any insert mesh brushes. You can always put a dummy proxy in the middle and do that. But you also, like, if you wanted to be like, oh, I want to go ahead and take this edge ring and extrude it, you'd have to go through here, and you could kind of do it if you just like unmask this or use masking, or you can delete lower and isolate these. It's just very, very limiting. It's kind of destructive too. So if you just, and it's also increases your file size. So you can just go through here and you can use D or Shift D to turn dynamic on and off is probably your best bet. Let's go ahead and reset this here. Very powerful, very useful. And let me change that range. There you go. Next up. How can such a powerful app like ZBrush, let's see, not have edge extruding feature like any other app? Vertex and edge extruding are very important. That's just ridiculous. I don't use a lot of vertex extruding, and regardless of the app that I'm using, but you can make the argument that edge extruding is important. However, in ZBrush, all you need is a little bit of thickness, and you can always knock it back. So if we go in here to initialize, let's go to, actually, you know what? Just hit Make Polymesh 3D. And then let's go to Skin Shader 4 so you can see it a little bit better. And in the geometry, we're going to hit Reconstruct and knock this plane back a little bit, and then we'll just hit Delete Higher. So with this here, you can't go over here if you try to do, I don't even do that often, Edge Extrude, A, B, C, D, here it is. So you can do Edge Extrude, and you can see you can extrude up and down, but this actually looks like it's creating some non-manifold geometry there, which isn't that good. This one, on the inside, is not so bad. If you take any of these outside edges, it creates a face down here, which will give you some problems here. So one thing you can kind of do, oops, delete higher. So we can raise this up, and then we can tap, and let's see if we can raise this one up. And you can also say QMesh, single poly, and we can pull this up. Now, it's not going to stick those together for some reason, but I really, and no, that's not manifold, that's why. So, and it's because it's on the edge. So I really, really dislike working single-sided in ZBrush. And it also, just in production, sometimes modeling single-sided can give you a whole slew of problems. So in ZBrush, to make it behave a little bit better, let's go ahead and turn on X symmetry here. It makes it go a little bit faster here. So if you want to model edge extrusions off of this thing, that would just be QMesh polygroup all. Just give it a little bit of a thickness, and now all day long you can just go through here and you can tag these and extrude these out, and then you can go like delete single poly, and then you can go to bridge 2 holes, and here and here. You kind of bridge these out maybe a little bit. And this also will allow you to go through here. We can do a QMesh, polygroup all, or we can just mark these ones. But as long as you have any sort of thickness, you'll always be able to extrude out from these edges. Now you may be saying, well, I do want something single-sided. And occasionally, I do want to just take the single-sided mesh and work with it. That's when I, again, go back to group by normals, Control-Shift isolated, geometry modify topology, delete hidden. And then I'm back where I started. We'll go ahead and uncrease all. And now from here, you can say QMesh here. If you do QMesh the opposite way, you're going to need to go down here to display properties and flip. And then that'll get you back in action. And then from here, if you want to put like a little ring on here, you could do QMesh polygroup all and then pull these things up. Or if you wanted to, you could do maybe an inset polygroup all here and then QMesh. You can push this back in or pull it out if you want to. You know, all that stuff. If you wanted to do just a cut through, we could do QMesh, or we can do inset polygroup all, and then we can go down here and tap, and then we can just QMesh back through. So QMesh polygroup all. There you go. So now I got the border. Or if you wanted both of these things, you wanted like to do a separate material, sometimes I'll do that, is I'll go to subtool here, and we'll duplicate this off. Now here I'm just going to run a crease tolerance at dynamic, and then smooth subdiv, crease level of 3, smooth subdiv of 4. And then on this duplicate here, I'll go through here and we'll say inset here, and then inset here, and then QMesh here, and then we'll do another crease, and then dynamic, same thing, crease level of 3, smooth subdiv of 4. And now we've got a separate piece here that I can just go through and widen this out. Now there's a little bit of Z fighting on here, so I can always go through and say QMesh polygroup all and just hold down Shift, and we'll give that a little bit of breathing room there. And now I can do 2 separate materials on these meshes here. Hello, side effects. Thanks for showing up. Just going through some YouTube comments here, trying to get caught up. Let's go back to comments. So that was subdivisions and edge extruding. Where's the material link? Cell shading. That one I'm not sure about. I'll have to go back and read what that thread's talking about. Here. OBJ, that was for, we have a, what's it called? Photogrammetry there that we, a little playlist that we have there. Brain exploded. Slowing down my voice, probably not. But what you can do if you are going through here and you're playing any of these, and you can probably just tell from my Twitch stream, I tend at a slightly faster cadence. You know, while you're playing these things, make sure you go to this gear, playback speed, and just you can do like 0.75. That doesn't make me sound too weird. Anything lower than that, I start to sound a little bit lurchy, but that can slow me down. Okay, this looks like a weird one. Let's see. How to import an OBJ with color and normal map into Substance, add detail and bake and export all of the layers. Import the OBJ and color map and normal map into ZBrush, add detail to the OBJ, then generate the export the color normal maps. Oh boy. I'm not import the color map and normal map into ZBrush. I'm not sure exactly why I would do that. I could see a case being made for like maybe importing a displacement map back into ZBrush and displacing geometry maybe. But you know, that's also pretty destructive. So ambient occlusion render in ZBrush and generating and exporting the normal maps. I'm not sure about that one. Oh, keep creases. So that's in the ZBrush community for this for a month, and they brought it. So in here, and this is a good one too. So if you guys haven't played around with the new ZRemesher algorithm, highly suggest you do. We go in here to make Polymesh 3D, and we go down here to append maybe a cube. So if I take this cube here, and we'll go ahead and scale this up a little bit. And let's go ahead and just do a little bit of Booleans here. So I'm going to take this one down, and we make this subtractive, and we turn on live Booleans. You're going to see we get a Boolean mesh here, so we can go ahead and punch that through. And I'm going to take this cube here, and let's go ahead and duplicate this cube off, and let's go ahead and make this subtractive here. And we can move this out, and we'll go ahead and scale it up and in a little bit. So this is just an easier way to kind of go through. And actually, you know what I'm going to do with this one? I'm going to go down here to initialize. We're going to do just a simple like 1 res Q cube. We could use a taper on that, but sometimes it's easier just to go ahead and taper, say, let's do this. If you have fewer polygons here. So we're going to shrink this down a little bit. And we'll kind of punch this in. And I'm going to hold down Control Alt, and we'll go ahead and scale this a little bit here. So we'll put a little bit of a taper on here. And so we can do Boolean modeling. We can do maybe this side here, and then hold down Control, and we'll maybe do this side here. So let's say this is our weirdo Boolean object. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to say, actually, it might be easier with a folder system in here. So what I'm going to do is just hit Control F, and we're going to say Boolean folder. And then I'm just going to drag these things in here. So now I have all of these guys in a folder, and we're still getting the same Boolean result. So now I can just go up here, and I can say Boolean folder. Now if I had any dynamic subdivisions turned on, I could use that, but I don't. So I'm just going to say Boolean folder. It's going to turn my folder off and put my Boolean right back out here. So with the new ZRemesher algorithm, this isn't symmetrical in the X symmetry. Boy, I just moved that all over the place, didn't I? What I'm going to do with this thing is I'm going to say deformation unify, and that's going to put it right smack dab in the middle of there and make it a ZBrush primitive size. And then we'll just do a quick mirror and weld. This is going to make ZRemesher go a little bit faster, and I have a symmetrical object now. So what I can do is I can go down here to geometry, and we can go down here to ZRemesher, and then we can say ZRemesher. We don't have any creases just yet. At this point we could do crease PG. So if we go in here to our crease menu, you see there's a crease PG option. That'll crease all your polygroups. And because we had a different polygroup on every side of that cube and the sphere and this one, it would actually do a fairly good job, although these edges maybe not. So what I would do is actually do another group by normals and grab those two. So we can isolate this one and say group by normals. And then now we have polygroups all over the place where we want them. If you didn't have that, or you brought this in from an external program, you might be able to do a group by normals. It seems to be having a little bit of a problem here. So let's try going down here to weld points and then doing a group by normals. There we go. So there was having some little bit of a weld points issues. But now that we have polygroups all over there, although right here it seems to be having a bit of an issue, so we're going to drop that group by normals down just a bit. There we go. And now we'll just do another, oops, let's do this, group by normals. And then we'll do a mirror and weld. Is this all the same kind? No. Okay, now these are separate polygroups, it looks like. It just doesn't look like they are. They're all the same shade of pink. So with that, we could do, if we just do a ZRemesher and disregard any polygroups or finding edges. In fact, we should probably just do that. Let's hit Control W, and we're just going to say detect edges for me, and we'll just say ZRemesh. So now it's going to go through and look for edges on here, and it'll do a fairly good job, as you can see. We also have X symmetry turned on, so it's symmetrical. So if you wanted to, you could go down here to half, and it also puts creases where your edges are. So at this point, we don't need to detect edges anymore. We can keep creases, and now we can just use ZRemesh and just keep hitting half, and it'll go ahead and just keep those detected. So now I have a nice low-res mesh here, and you know, at this point, we could go through and model what we need to, or another thing we can do is under the crease menu, we can hold down Control and just pop in little bevels on here. If you don't hold down Control, it'll just do interior bevels. This one will kind of extrude things out and keep them nice and crispy. These interior edges may do something weird, so you may want to uncrease those. So we're going to go over here to crease edge loop partial, and we're just going to say, or we can actually say, let's do crease edge loop partial, hold down Alt, and we'll go ahead and get rid of these interior creases. I wonder if there's a concave crease option. And now if we hold down Control, that'll go ahead and, it is still crossing those over. I guess there's not just a way around that. You could try doing a weld, but I'm not sure how much that would work. Hey, Rick, thanks for showing up. Michael Yang. Question. How to split your final sculpt work at the end and set it next to each other so it can be in a different pose. So you have an example of front view and a side view of your sculpt for a showcase preview. If you were talking about just rendering, and I would probably do that in post, like in Photoshop, where I would have an object here. Let's say I've got, okay, here's my, let's grab the demo soldier here. There we go. So we've got my sculpt here, and I want to go, okay, I want a 3/4 view. So I'm going to have hit a BPR render, and then I'm going to go to my render pass, and I can export my render passes. Or if I'm just going to grab my document, you can go here to Texture, grab Doc, and then export this as a PSD or a JPEG or anything like that. And then if I wanted to do a front view and a side view, I could do that, or a back view. If you want to do an automatic character sheet, what you can do is you can go in here to your document, and there is a ZapLink Properties character sheet. So if you're not a big fan of going up here to your movie timeline, so if you go up here to movie timeline show, and it's like, okay, I'm going to be sculpting on this guy, and I've got some spotlight reference in here, so I'm going to store an image, or store a camera view really, and then I can go through here and I can sculpt on him, and then I can use the arrow keys to kind of cycle through my different camera views. If you're not into that, you can go ahead and get rid of that one, just drag it off, and then movie timeline show off. You can go down here and you can say, you know what, I'm just going to store a little button, custom one, in my ZapLink view, and then I can just hit custom one. Now you can also do this in your draw menu. You have down here, underneath here, you have you can store cameras and even rename them and switch between them. It's up to you, but if you want to use ZapLink, that's what you can do. However, you can also use this to make a character sheet. So custom one is this one. Custom two will do like a back 3/4. Front, we can capture. It's going to capture your back automatically. Right and left and top and bottom. You don't have to do all these, but you can. And now you can just say make character sheet. It'll go through, and then it'll shoot it out into Photoshop, and then this will be your top, right, left. Whoa, Photoshop. It's big. Let's make it so you guys can see it here. Something like this. So there's your character sheet. You're going to see the background has this alpha out if you just want to. Whoops. Sorry about that loud noise there. if you just want to fill that with a black, and then these are also already have their alphas, so you can do that. Another thing you can do is, it's probably not going to work that great. If you can also do Shift S, and you can just kind of store a snapshot right in your desktop here. However, if you want to do a BPR render, it's going to get rid of everything. So generally, you want to do like a nice render of your stuff. So if you try to, do a BPR render and then do Shift S, it's not going to capture the BPR render part. It's just going to capture this part. There is a filter you can use. We're getting a little bit weird now, but if you're so inclined, you could use a filter. Let's see if I remember what it is. It was, what am I doing? Not Z plugin. Underneath your render settings. So if you guys haven't checked out the BPR filters yet, I would highly suggest you go into the ZBrush 2019 What's New. Okay, what happened here? Playlists. So here's on this one. This is just kind of a get you caught up really quickly. It's 50 something videos for just ZBrush in general updated. And then this one here is ZBrush 2019 What's New, and it starts out with the new BPR system. A lot of really fun stuff you can do in here. So part of that is just the ability to go through here, and we can use these filters. So you can go through here and you can say, let's do a, what am I thinking here? Actually, it might be easier if you want to, just to go in here and do like your render sets. So we can say, look, give me some black and white outline artwork or a blueprint like this, and then you can kind of store this. And then you can go here and you get BPR render, and it's all these filters that are creating this effect here. So you could store, save out your images like this. However, there's also another filter in here. So if we do, oh boy, I don't know if I remember exactly how to do this off the top of my head. There's a filter. Oh, what is it? There's a filter, and then you can just store. I mean, I guess you could do a drop shadow that you can just offset here. I'm not gonna waste your time digging through here and trying to remember how to do it. Well, let's try it. Okay, here's drop shadow, and then if we say under modifiers, opacity, X offset, you can just, yeah, I guess maybe not. Yeah, there's something in here. It's in the back of my head where you can go through and you can just save an image off of here, and I'm not going to remember the name of it. Render sets. Oh no. Reflection aberration. No, I don't think that's it. Although it might be. I don't know. Go through these and read them, and you can get caught up there. But yeah, there's a way where you can use a filter to kind of do another view with BPR as well. But I don't remember what it is. Sorry. Does baking results become weird when having an object that is crazy triangulated Boolean from a low density mesh with a high density one? Example, a cube and maybe some surface detail mesh cut. Yeah, it does. So depending on what you're using to render, if you have something like this, go into edit mode, make polymesh 3D, this would bake fine. So if we wanted to, we were doing some creasing, but if you said, okay, you know what, let's do, again, crease level of 2, smooth subdiv of 3, I mean, get a very, very nice result you could bake from this. Let's actually do a smooth subdiv of 4. So this would bake fine. We could even do a crease level of 1 and really kind of soften those edges. And then you could bake to the low poly and it would bake fine. However, if you go back, let's turn this off and we turn this back on and we say Boolean folder. So we've got this one here. If you tried to bake from this, all these little triangles would do a pretty horrifying job. And also, since we remember, we need to do a quick weld points. That's under geometry modified topology, by the way. So, and then we'll just do a mirror and weld as well. Oh yeah, I moved it. Okay, fine. Unify, mirror and weld. There we go. And weld points. Boy, I just used it. How do I lose these things? There it is. So Yeah, if you tried to bake from this, you'd get some pretty nasty artifacting right around here. One way to kind of alleviate that is to use, instead of using very, very few points, if you're using densities, like you see how dense this mesh is, if this mesh density kind of matched that one and this mesh density kind of matched that one before you booleaned, it would work out much better. But at the end of the day, kind of one thing you can do is you can just go through here and we can do a Dynamesh, and you can export this and bake to it, so you can just kind of dial in the resolution you need. But even this, you probably wouldn't want to bake something that sharp. You'd have some edges in there anyway. So in fact, what we could do, let's do a crease. Okay, we'll do a group by normals. We'll do a max angle down, and we'll do a mirror and weld, and then we'll do a crease PG, and then down here in our crease, we're going to hold down control, and we'll just add a little bit of a bevel in there. And then now that we have that, yeah, it'd probably be better to zero mesh that. So even these vertices right here are going to do some nasty things. It's just difficult to go through here and do much of anything with this kind of nasty geometry. So one thing we can do is we can go down here and we can say, let's go ahead and Dynamesh this, and then we can use a, there's a deformation. We could try polishing. You can try polishing this object and kind of smoothing it out a little bit. You can also just use a smooth deformer, and you can just go through here and just drag, and that'll give you an overall smoothing effect on your edges. And if you bake from this, it'd be fine. Nice, even geometry. If you wanted to get, you could also do like a round edges shader in Houdini or Modo. I wonder if that would work better. I'm not sure. I'm not certain on that. But that's maybe one workaround you could do. Cool. Hey, thanks for showing up. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've done one of these streams. I'm going to try and do one on Thursday as well for my own channel. Just to say I did. Just to say I am. How would you export fiber mesh hair to the other applications like Marmoset Toolbags? I'm having problems with XGen and Maya. Oh boy, it's been a long time since I've done that. You could always do it as geometry as a worst case scenario. So if we go in here to project and we say, give me a anime head. Oh, one thing you can do is you now have this load tools from project. So if I didn't want to wipe out my entire scene here, you can now just load tools that are in a project. So that's a fun one. So in here, if we want to go ahead and say, give me some fiber mesh, and we go down here to our fiber mesh and we say preview it. And you know what? These modifiers are probably fine. We're going to drop these max fibers down just a bit and then change that coverage just a little bit. So let's say we've got some fiber mesh hair we want to use. We're going to say accept, and then subtool here, head, we can go ahead and unmask that. And also you want to make sure that you don't have double-sided turn on. I should have checked that. Yeah. So that way it doesn't have fiber mesh on the inside and the outside. So we've got this here, so we can go to like BG, brush groom, hair toss maybe, and we can go through and kind of comb these hairs out a little bit. Nice. So now in order to get these out of here, let's go to render. Here's our hair. Well, that doesn't look very good. Let's switch to, if we want to have this head stay matcap gray, we can go to mRGB and we go to color, fill object, and then for the fiber mesh here, let's go down here and let's see if we can put like a hair shader on those so that they kind of maybe pop a little bit. I wonder if I have, no live booleans are on. It looks like it's almost hashed or something. There's something really bizarre going on with these project settings. What we could do is we could do save as. Wait for it. That was weird. We can go to my desktop here and say tests, and then we go to preferences, initialize. And tools will save everything that you've just done as your in your tool palette. So you'll be safe. And then now, yeah, that's more of what I was expecting. So not sure what's happening in the other project, but so now we have a mustache here. To export this, there might be under fiber mesh export. You can export the displacement. You can export the curves. Export fibers as curves if you needed to. But if you wanted to, I think if you export these as is, it would export it as an OBJ. And then if you really wanted to convert these, when you're playing with your fiber mesh, you could, maybe we can do this. Can we convert BPR to Geo? And so now if we try to groom these, let's see, brush groom, hair toss. Yeah, so now we just converted these to geometry, so we can go through here and we can kind of just, you know, sculpt on them. So now if we export these, it'd be geometry instead of fibers too. So that could be another way you could do that. And then if it's just geometry, you could also export that as a FBX, so FBX exporter. I think that might work. Again, that's not something I do all that often, but Blade Runner 2049 soundtrack is what I listen to while you stream. That's I need to pick that one up. It's been a while since I haven't listened to it. I've been in spreadsheets for too long. I would love to get back into doing some artwork and and listening to things. Because in the 2018 presentation, the mech piece, you said it was using dynamic to keep the file low while having Boolean surface details. Yeah, that's a good point. So we can load that up too if you want to. So, oops, let me pull this down here in case there's stuff in here I don't want you to see. Drone. High res. Okay. So in here, you're going to see a bunch of different versions of the drone. And you're going to see there's a low res game res mesh. You're going to see there's a bake version. This is the Booleans actually applied and the dynamic subdivisions actually applied. And there's a UMesh version that's 102 megs. This is actually after the Booleans have been baked into the mesh. And there's the start groups, and this is only 16 meg. So if we load this up, you're going to see, after we load it up, that it's 16 meg, but it looks like a much higher res file because we're using a bunch of array mesh and we're using a bunch of dynamic subdivisions to kind of, let's go ahead and see if we can turn on polyframe here. So if you select any of these and we go into solo mode and we do Shift D to turn it all off, you're going to see this is what the geometry really looks like. Then we hit D, makes it look a little bit nicer. And again, these are fairly simple shapes. There's not a whole lot going on there, but I'm trying to see if there's a better example. Over here, there's the Boolean. So if we turn on live Boolean here, you're going to see this is where all the Booleans get cut in. So processing this thing down into a usable bakeable mesh takes a little bit of work, but the overall working file for this object is fairly simple. So if we turn on perspective here, and we go ahead and do a BPR render. This is in the videos here if you want to kind of do something like this. But this is where you can have a little bit of fun with your filters here. So getting more of a, let me see if I remember how to do all this. Again, it's been so long since I've actually done artwork. What am I looking for here? I'm looking for a flat shading. So we can turn this into more of a comic book render. You can go down here and we can say, let's go to modifiers and we can change the number of shades if that gives us a little bit of a better effect. And then over here, we can say, what's another good filter? The Orton filter is kind of good if we want to do maybe a little bit of contrast. You can also do contrast user color. I like to use this one because you can change the front color to kind of give you a different effect. You can actually make it colorize if you wanted to. So you can kind of go through and change the contrast. One thing you probably want to do, you see there's a slight gradient to these shadows. So underneath render here, let's go to, oh, I guess we have render open over here. BPR shadow. And render properties. We can do flat shadows, turn vibrate down to 0. Then we'll hit BPR again, and that'll go ahead and flatten out your shadows. And then also, under BPR shadow, we have a global strength and a floor strength. And I also want to change the direction of that light. That's kind of gross. We'll kind of put the light towards the front there. And then once we have that, we can go through here and we can say, you know what, let's change that global strength and that floor strength down just a bit. And then that'll go ahead and lighten up those areas so you can get a little bit more detail in there. And it's kind of washed out right now. So underneath your BPR filters, we can go ahead and we can pop some outlines here. There's a couple different ways to do that. We can outline an edge, and we can also outline a cavity. And there's actually a bunch of different ways you can do this, but two easy ones is outline edge. You can go through here and then under the modifiers. The more it's towards the black color is the more black it'll get, but of course you can change this background color to be whatever you want. But black usually makes the most sense. So now we can go through here in the modifiers and we can say change that outline edge thickness. So we can do an edge outline, and then also you can turn on interior cavity too if you want. You do inside and exterior, but we'll just go ahead and leave that here. You can also change the fall off to get more interior details, but if you're going to do interior details, I could use this for the outline edge, and then you can also, radius isn't going to do much on this one, but if you had another filter, I'm going to turn it on. Actually, let's do an orthon filter, just going to get some contrast in there, and then this filter, we're going to go ahead and do outline cavity. And this will go through and outline your cavity areas. So in here, you can say, you can crank up the radius if you want more thicker line. You can change the cavity fall off here, so you can, the more you go to the left, the more it's going to pick up angle changes and cavity sensitivity. You can also dial that up and down too to kind of get the effect you want. So here's my interior edges, and if you don't want them that heavy, like here it is all outlined, you can either take the outline cavity. However, this is just going to make it more gray or white. You can also go down here to opacity, and you can just drop this back down just to kind of maybe pick up a hint of those interior edges. You can kind of play around with that a little bit. So yeah, these are fun to kind of play around with. There's this place that's already kind of pushed in there, so if we change that radius here, we can start eating up those edges a little bit, and then this is the one that they would use for like a blend mode darken, and then drop that opacity down, and you can kind of start getting like you did a little bit of a sketch. So let's go ahead and crank that radius up. There we go, and then drop that opacity down. That'll kind of give you a sketchy kind of look here. And then these are kind of fun to play around with too, as far as screen tone. Let's do screen tone dots, and we can say, you know what, I want to mask it just to the object itself, or we can mask it just to the background, or we can mask it just to the background and just to the background shadow, or we can mask it to both the object shadow and the background shadow. So there's a lot of masking options available to you. And then under here, you can drop these screen dots down and it'll make them smaller. You can also drop them down to the negative, and it'll be white dots on a black background or black dots on a white background. So we'll go negative a little bit here. And then also make them bigger or smaller. And then under modifiers, I think you can tell it constant size. So if you want it to be 100% the same size, you can crank that up. If you crank it down, it'll change its size based on value. And you can also change the blend mode. So we can say maybe make this a multiply, and then we'll drop that opacity down, and you can put just a little bit of halftone in those shadows. So now, no matter what you bring in, what object you bring in, you can do that. And you can also save this as a render set. So up here at the top, you can say render save, and you can save it into your render set lightbox here. So let's do that real quick. ZBrush 2019. What am I looking for here? Render presets, and we'll call this test. I just name everything test. And so now when we hit the comma key here underneath our render sets, there should be a test in here with a little thumbnail of our ABHIJKLMNO. There it is. So here's the little thumbnail of our object. So anything we render, we can load this in. And you can also just go through here and you can say, you know what, I want to render out a blueprint instead. And then it'll load up this render set here. So now, you know, you can have those render settings apply to your objects here. So if you wanted to do like an orthographic view, I would turn off perspective. We can snap it here, hit BPR, and then it'll give us a, oh, it also changed my SPIX. If you want it to render a little bit faster, you can turn SPIX down to 1 or 0, and then it'll just render a little bit quicker. Can I start low poly and subdivide it back to the high res into the low for video game? Yeah, you can always start with if you're just gonna block out your model in a low poly mesh and then just subdivide it, put in some control loops, or you don't even have to do that. Let's do this. one thing I like to do instead of building in a bunch of control loops is to utilize, let's start with a polymesh 3D and turn off live boolean. And we're going to go down here to initialize Q cube. And let's do a resolution of 1. And then we'll do a mirror and weld, hit X to go across X symmetry here. And now we can do like Q mesh, polygroup all. We can pull this out and then alt tap these. So if you just have a hard surface mesh like this that you're creating, you can go through here and you can say, let's go ahead and just do a crease and then crease level of 3, smooth subdiv of 4, and you can use subdivisions to kind of get this result. But if you are just doing like blocky high-res stuff, instead of doing smooth subdivs, I would say maybe use QGrid and then change your coverage here. And then we can change it from a bevel to a chamfer if you want more rounded edges, like so. And again, this is non-destructive, so you can do Shift D and it just goes out of that mode. So if you want to go through here and say, you know what, let's Q mesh this out like this. Oops. There you go. Also, let's say Q mesh align full step here. And if I want to change that, let's go to insert single edge, pull down Alt, and then do another mirror and weld. So we have that, and then I can just pull these out. You can either pull along the surface normal here, you can add another edge ring here, and then we can go like, I don't know, inset. First of all, let's do a polygroup poly loop here, and then we could do, let's make that a little more obvious, and then inset polygroup all region, and then we could do Q mesh, pull that in, and then when we turn D back on, this is the result we're getting, and then you can go through here and you can change your coverage, tighten that up a little bit. So instead of, and this is just a preview, however, if you go down here to apply, and I don't have to build an edge control loops. I don't have to go through here and be like, okay, insert an edge here and insert an edge here. Now, the part of this may not work really well if you want to do variable radiuses on your smoothing. So like I can't make this one smooth softer than this one. With QGrid, it's like all or nothing. But if you do just want like a bevel on an object like this, this would be an easier way to do it. If you did want a little bit more control, that's when you go out of QGrid and then you start using like your crease and then smooth subdiv of 4 and crease level of 3. And you can actually do crease all if you know everything needs to be creased. And now let's say crease level of 4, smooth subdiv of 5. So then you can go through here and you can start adding in. It's like these are, let's do crease level of 3. Just to kind of show. So this one's a little bit softer, and maybe that's what you want, but if you don't, now you can start adding in control loops where you need them. So you can be like, okay, let's tighten this one up a little bit, and let's tighten this one up a little bit, and put in little control loops here to kind of make that work for you. But yeah, for your low poly, it would be, okay, so we have, this version is my low poly, so we can do Shift D, and there's my low poly, here's my high poly. If we want to bake to this, I would have probably a version of this file with my dynamic not applied, and then I would go through and say dynamic and hit apply. You can do that all at the same time if you have the zRepeat It plugin. So if you go over here to zRepeat It, and you can download these plugins, just Google Pixelogic downloads, and in fact, if you go to my, I believe, ZBrush for Ideation playlist here. If we do Control F, there should be plugin. Yeah, ZBrush, number 34, installing ZBrush plugins. And that'll walk you through the installation process. But anyway, in here you can see I probably have dynamic apply in here. It's like a action script recording, so you can go through here and you can say, okay, dynamic apply while you record it, and then you can name it, and then it can go through all of your subtools and apply those dynamics. So now I actually have real subdivisions here. So you'd have one that you could export as your bake mesh, and then one working file you could have as just your low-res mesh. Hey Fabio, thanks for showing up. Ricky says, when I transfer my detail to a retopologized mesh at high subdivision levels, my mesh explodes. Do you have any tips on how to fix that problem so it won't explode when I start going to higher subdivision levels? Yeah, maybe. That can happen sometimes. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. Let's do something. Let me see, sample files here. Load something up to play with detail on it. So here's from the Reptile Creature series. And so this guy has a bunch of stuff on him. So I'm going to take his head here and we're going to isolate just his head. And you know what we can do, since it's already kind of retopologized, I'm going to duplicate this guy off, and we're going to say go down to subdivision lower, and we're just going to delete higher. So let's say this is our low-res mesh that we've z-remeshed and retopologized and cleaned up. If you want more information on that on my YouTube channel, just Google z-remesh and z-sphere retopology, and I'll walk you through that. But if we want to project those details back, you're going to see we have these two showing, and we only have these two showing. Anything else that's showing is it's going to project to. So at this point, we go to project, hit project all, and I'll project those, and then we hit Control D, and then project all, and then Control D, and then project all. So this is what should happen. Occasionally, what it's essentially doing is those low-res vertices are looking for the next nearest vertice to snap to. So if you have a vertice that's like inside the mesh and it wants to sometimes it'll do something bizarre, like it'll be slightly inside the mesh and it'll want to snap to something way over here, or it'll just kind of go crisscross all over the place and go crazy. And occasionally in little areas too, depending on, again, where the nearest vertice is, it may not work that well. So if we hit Control D and then project all. If you want to see the difference between these, you can go into solo mode, and then you can say, here's this one selected, and then you can select this one. You can see, okay, yeah, we're still losing a little bit of geometry, or we're losing a little bit of resolution. We can actually hit Control D, and we still have solo on, but it'll still project fine, as long as the eyeball's on for the other one. That's not to say you can do camera-based brushes without the other one actually showing. So now this one, and then this one, it's a little bit higher res, but I think we can live with this. So this one we can just turn off. So now we've got this newly projected one, and now I can look through for errors on here. Occasionally it will not hit, it won't scatter out, and that's when you can go in here and you could say under your project settings you can play with the distance, the mean, the blur. I'm trying to remember if there's any decent settings. There's a displacement tolerance here, so you can kind of, I'd have to see the model in order to, but I mean all I would do is go in here and play with these settings and hit project and see if I could, project those details back on. One thing I would suggest is just subdividing once and projecting, subdivide, project, subdivide, project, instead of subdivide, 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 project. It'll give you a little bit more of an accurate result. But occasionally, if we go in here to like brush layer, and we go through here, occasionally it'll just miss. You'll have like a bunch of stuff on here that's just like, didn't quite, or even underneath maybe a little bit, just didn't project out. This is where I would use BZP, your Z project brush, and then you can go through here. And now this one is camera based, so you do have to have the other mesh showing. And you can just Z project, hold down Alt and Z project out. Now I would be careful if and it is camera based, so you want to make sure you turn your camera. However, you're going to say, okay, everything's looking great, and I'll go through here and Z project this. And then you go into solo mode, and then you look on this side of your mesh, and it's just trashed. That's because it's projecting, it's camera based, so if I go to the side here, it's going to grab these vertices and shove them over to this side. So how to fix that is, number one, go out of X symmetry, and then we can hold down Alt and project out to this, and then let go of Alt and project back in, and then you can alternate between Alt and project. Let's project this back to the mesh here manually, do a little bit of cleanup work. But now we've got this side, which is good, this side, which is bad. If it's not symmetrical, don't worry about it. Just go back on this side and start doing the same to the other side. If it is symmetrical, you can mask one side, and you can go down here to your deformation, and you can say Smart Resim across the x-axis, and then I'll go ahead and do a Smart Resim. This one will actually do a more accurate result if you go down to like something level 1, Smart Resim, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up, but it did fine. So something to consider. How would you insert a nanomesh to the center of a whole polygroup instead of every quad face within that polygroup? Okay, let's try that. I'm not positive off the top of my head, but let's see. So if we have a cube 3D, drag it out, go into make polymesh 3D here, and then we'll do a quick group by normals. So nanomesh is awesome. So if we want to do insert a nanomesh on here, let's make something, I'm trying to think if there's anything that we can have a little bit more leeway with than the default. Let's go out of edit mode here. Let's go grab that make polymesh 3D, and we're going to go down here to initialize Q cube. That'll give us enough to work with, I think. So we can actually do D, actually let's just do 1. There we go. Like Control W, make it all in polygroup. Now there's a couple different ways you can make a nanomesh brush. You can just go hit B, create insert mesh, new, and then brush, create nanomesh brush, or you can just leave this sitting out here, and this just makes you a new brush with ZModeler with nanomesh. This already applied as a nanomesh. And this will allow you to dictate the direction a little bit better of where you captured it from, so you don't have to use the rotational values in nanomesh. But you can also just have an object sitting out here, and you can hit M, and you can just select any object that you have available to you that you've made and use that as a nanomesh brush. So if we go back to our object here, and we hover over face, it's insert nanomesh on a single poly, so that'll just do a single poly. If we do polygroup all, it'll insert a nanomesh on all those polygroups here. But if we wanted to insert a nanomesh just in the middle of here, let's see, there is some options in here. So if we go, okay, insert nanomesh, and then let's see, Z rotation, we'll just put that back down to 0. There's patterns on here and H tiles you can do. So if you wanted to put them like up in the corners, you could say 2 and 2. Then you could say like border or corners. Let's turn the size down here. So now you can like put them in the corners of the polygroups. Let me see. Checker odd, so you can do like domino effect. Switch it around the other way. But there's no like, you can do a grid pattern here. But as far as just putting one here, let's try something weird. Let's see if we can do, if we do random distribution, that'll just kind of randomly distribute these around. And that can be useful if you wanted to do like some offset values here and change their variances. And we were doing this with my CGMA class as well. Actually, we can change their variances that way as well. So if we want to go in here to edit mesh, and then we can say subdivide that a couple times, you can see we get like a little bubbles we can put on there. But what I was thinking, what I was hoping against hope, was that if we did random distribution of 1, and then, oops, y offset 0, turn off random array, and it's really just confining it to that 1. Let's say pattern of 0. I'm trying to determine like where, I'm not positive on that one. Insert a nanomesh at the center of the whole polygroup instead of every quad face within that polygroup. I mean, this is hacky, but because if it is just going to be a nanomesh that you're worried about, we could duplicate this off, isolate this. We could say delete hidden, and then we could try doing a quick geometry reconstruct, and then delete higher. And then when we go in here to insert nanomesh, polygroup all or single poly, we can just do that. But of course, on a curved surface, this isn't going to work that well. But now, yeah, I don't know. That's a good one. I'm not sure about that one. How do you decide how many low-res meshes to have when you have many subtools in the high-res? And subspated the subtools become their own texture sets. I want them to share the same set. Yeah, I don't set up my texture sets in ZBrush. It's just easier to do it in an external program. And really, I can have, I will bake, because I generally, unless I'm doing something very specific like an armor set and a bodysuit, and or I want to break them up into separate texture sets like that, I would just do it in an external program where I assign the materials. I wish I had a better answer for you. I do have more information on that at my YouTube channel. Just in general, I think we've done it a couple dozen times of just kind of going from ZBrush to, through Houdini into Maya, or ZBrush to Houdini into Marmoset, or ZBrush into Maya into Marmoset, or any of that kind of stuff. So out of ZBrush, I wouldn't know. I don't bother trying to like do my material assignments, and also I need more control over my smoothing groups a lot of times, especially on hard surface stuff. So when you go and export out of ZBrush on your FBX exporter, you can export smooth normals or off smooth normals, but you can't, like, say, crease my UV or not to smooth my UV border edges, for example, something like that. But yeah, basically for a complex object, which, do we still have that one open? Yeah. For example, if we go out of here, let's go ahead and delete this one. So we have this object here, and this has a bunch of different subtools. You can see this is a subtool, and then this is a subtool, and this is a subtool here. So this is a good example. So I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to shoot all these with the bent arrow up to the top, and then we're going to isolate just these three. So if I was going to make a low res for this, and I wasn't going to have to like animate this out of here for some reason, I just needed to be stuck in there. What I would do is I would have this as my high res, and you could keep these as separate, although you could also just merge everything together and assign your polygroup IDs. But for your high res, you could name this shoulder underscore high underscore body, shoulder underscore high underscore cylinder, shoulder underscore high underscore I don't know, plate. And then those three will all be packed under shoulder underscore high. And then your low res could just be shoulder underscore high, because you're not going to break off all these pieces. You're going to z-remesh them all together. For example, I could just do a quick merge visible, and then we'll do an insert here. And this is going to be quick and dirty, but if I want to make an envelope of these, I can just go down here and I could say Dynamesh, and that'll give me my envelope. And then I could either z-remesh this, or I could just decimate this down to my let's say 2K. So here could be my low res, or maybe even 1K. So this will be my low res I bake to. And you can clean this up or manually retopologize. I'm just trying to do something quick. So if this is my low res now, I could UV it, and then I would just make sure to name this shoulder underscore high, and then all of these ones would be shoulder underscore high underscore you could even just do 01, doesn't really matter if you don't want to be that organized. And then it'll group all of these for your bake sets and then bake them here. But yeah, your material sets is all controlled by your low res. So if you wanted everything to be one texture set, I just do it in an external program. Just easier for me to organize. If you use an outside program like Substance for additional detail ideation, what's the best way to accurately bring that back into ZBrush? My end goal is the 3D print, so I need to create actual geometry versus maps for a render. You could export a displacement map that you could then bring back in. So if we had, let's go ahead and delete this. So if we had all these, let's go ahead and merge these down too. So we'll say merge. Oh, and when I say like filling these with material IDs, essentially that would be, you can use the new color menu, the new Z plugin color. I do have that set up. I think I did. I made a Z color thing. Oh yeah, a Z color plugin that has all these different things loaded in, so you can actually use this. I also have a really quick thing I like to use, just like a simple color swatches that I can just let's go into Skin Shader 4 so I can see them a little bit better. Let's drop those over here, go out of edit mode, and then we'll grab this one here. So if I wanted to say just sample from these, I can hit C, and then we can hold down Control Shift, and then go ahead and fill that with a color, and then C. Am I not getting this? Color, fill object, Alt Control F. Oh, that's right. I forgot. I forgot my own hotkeys. And then this one here, and then this one here. You can do something like, hey, let's just do a poly paint from polygroups. But these aren't really mathematically separated values. These are like 255, 255, 0. These are anything. So I trust these colors a little bit better just for finer mass generation. So anyway, what were we talking about? We were talking about, oh yeah, bringing detail back in. So if you were in Substance Designer and you, boy, that's a bad decision on that. So if you're in Substance Designer, let's hit Control N to clear that off my canvas. And let's go grab a white material. You could bring in anything as a displacement map that you could apply to your object. Now your object would have to have UVs and stuff, so yeah, I would decimate down. I would probably use Houdini for that, honestly, like decimate down to something fairly low and then use our UV tools, because what you'd have to do is bring a displacement back in. If we go down here to our, what's a good example? So if you had did something in substance, let's use the noise plug here, and we'll do a like a weave. And then if you want to see what this is doing, because these are essentially displacement maps as well. And it could just be a simple height map. And we'll go ahead and say mix basic noise down to 0. And we'll say the plugin scale, we'll scale this down. And the strength and the, what am I looking for here? And then strength here. Say okay. So if you made a displacement map in Substance and you exported it back out, you could go through here and under surface noise, actually, you would probably go down here to your displacement. If you were doing just something tiling and you wanted a little bit more control, you could load it up into surface noise here. So I'd say go down here to this alpha on and off and just import it into there. But for you, if it was like a 0 to 1 and you're baking out a bunch of different noise, that would be under displacement map. You would load up your displacement map in here, and then you would turn it on. You'd probably have to play around with the intensity settings a little bit, and then you can hit apply displacement map, and it'll apply your height channel as a displacement. So something like that. Kim says, how do I set it up? 325. I'm not quite positive here. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Sorry, I'm a little bit lost. Follow the comic style render and use the matte cap grabber, but the end result is metallic. Should I start with a different material, or is there a different approach to get flat colors matte cap? Yeah, flat colors on a matte cap. If you want the super easy answer, let's go ahead and turn off our noise here. So if you did have a matte cap, like maybe matte cap pearl, and you wanted a flat result, like so, that would be what we did. Let's also turn this down. Yeah, so that took a long time to render. If you turn aspects down to 0, it'll be a little bit faster. So, and again, this is just a preview render, so if you wanted to change that. But for a flatter look, again, flat shadow, vibrant down to 0, and then also just really quickly, and again, this isn't really answering your question, but consider going down here to filter, and then you can also use posterize. There's posterize in here too, but you can also use flat shading, and that'll give you blend mode and modifiers. The min intensity, you can actually go down here, and actually if you just want to apply this just to your model, let's just crank that up, and then the modifiers, min intensity, you can crank that up if you want to wash everything out a little bit, or you can darken that down, and then your max intensity, you can also take that from a pure white down. So play with that, and then also you can change what point along that curve that's going to grab, so you can change your exponent to dial that in as well. So we can say number of shades 5, max intensity of 1, min intensity of 0. But yeah, as far as matte caps go, yeah, if it's giving you kind of a metallic result, because your matte cap is kind of metallic and you're using matte cap grabber to bake that to your mesh, then yeah, I think that would just be a matter of in the matte cap settings, where would that be? In your material settings, I should say. Going through here and making, yeah, because if the matte cap looks metallic, then yeah, it's just going to bake metallic. So if, for example, I'm not even sure how to do it in a matte cap. I could do it in here. If in case you were not using a matte cap, you can actually go through here and you can add texture in here, and then up here underneath the reflectivity, you can crank that up and make it look more metallic. But for a matte cap, ooh, I'm not sure. I don't do it enough to just kind of know. Hey Mike, can you make taper lines with the new NPR? You, like for sketchy lines, like thick and thin, somebody who's used it more will probably have to do that. We can give it a shot. Let's see. So we're going to go back to our render here. And if we go down here, so we've done a flat shading. I'm going to throw just a filter to kind of lighten this up a little bit here. And also back underneath our render settings, shadow settings, let's go to, just drop that strength down. I at least see a little more detail in my shadows here. There we go. And then if we wanted to say, also, you know what? Let's take this and this min intensity. I am going to wash it out just a bit, just because I'm going to use the line work to do a little bit more of that heavy lifting. So then if we did want to maybe go down here and say, let's do the outline cavity here so we can start getting some line work here. And then we'll say cavity radius, crank that up, and we'll make that a little bit darker so we can see it. And then we'll grab that sensitivity and we'll knock that back a little bit and that fall off. Cavity, noise. There we go. So yeah, if you wanted to go like, okay, where it's darker, and usually it would be like for line weight, it would be where it's in the shadows, it would be darker. Where it's not in the shadows, it would be lighter. I wonder if a blend mode, I'd have to play around with that. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head. Because like in hard light, you can see in the shadows the line work is darker and then it fades a little bit. So you can maybe play around with your blend modes to kind of see if you can get a little bit more of that effect. But that's not really a taper. That's just more of a dark to light, kind of maybe an illusion of thick to thin a little bit better. You can also use, if we turn on this other filter, now this isn't like thick to thin sketch line, but you can do, let's see if I remember how to do this. This would be overpaint texture here. And then if we crank this up a little bit and we go into modifiers, you can taper these things here. So you can say, we change the width and then the height down. And then if you wanted to rotate them, and then if you wanted to do a X slope, that will taper thick to thin. So if you wanted to get like sketchy lines one direction, you can go thicker to thinner sketchy lines. But yeah, this probably isn't what you're looking for here. And then but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's like I'm sure that can be done. I just haven't played around with it enough to kind of figure that out. Make transparent objects with the new NPR. We can try, let's go ahead and turn this last one off here. So for just basic transparency, let's do this. Let's go to append, a sphere. And with the sphere selected, we're going to go to transparency mode. And just to make these, I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter. It just scares me to have this much geometry, honestly. So I'm going to, when I'm using nanomesh type stuff, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say depth size down to 0, half, and zero mesh it. And then just keep hitting half just to kind of simplify the sphere out a little bit because I just need the volume more than anything. And then for the actual bubbles here, we can say polymesh 3D. Go into edit mode, and again, we just make these super simple. So we'll initialize these as just a cube, because what happens with the cube when I hit D is it makes it into a sphere. So we can make these our nanomesh brush, and then again, we'll just hit B, create insert mesh, new brush, create nanomesh brush. So now back to here. We can go through here, and if I want bubbles on here, I can say insert nanomesh onto polygroup all, and we can start making our bubbles. However, if I want to go on the inside, we're going to go down here to display properties and we're going to flip it. And so now when I do my nanomesh here, let's go ahead and change my length, width, and height variances. Just get a little bit of variance, and then we'll make these a little bit smaller, just so some bubbles floating around. And now when I do my offsets, I can offset interiorly. And there we go. So now let's change that side just a little bit so you can see. Change that to offset. There we go. And then random distribution. Okay, so nanomesh inventory 1 to mesh, Control Shift isolate that, invert that, delete hidden, hit D, and now we've got some bubbles on here. I'm going to go ahead and just say smooth subdiv of maybe 5, just to make those super shiny. So in order to render transparency, you're going to see, if I go into BPR rendering, they don't render transparently. Now, I'm not positive if it'll render transparent at all if I do this, but how to render transparently in ZBrush without filters is you can go down here with these selected, and you can go to display properties, and you can turn on transparent shading, say always yes, or you can say yes once, and then underneath render, you're going to see it's turning transparency on and off for this object. So now when you hit BPR, that'll go ahead and render out transparency, and then you can go here and you can say, okay, the visibility here, and it does look like it's, oh shoot, not aspects of 7. So now, yeah, it does look like it's a little bit transparent. If you want to give them a little bit different material properties, you can go in here and you could say reflected map, mRGB, color, fill object, and then we'll go back to here. And now, because it's NPR, if you had a matte cap replacement filter, it would replace these. In fact, let's go ahead and do an inflate on these objects here just so we can see it a little bit more obviously. So we got the NPR shading. It is transparent. You can go through here in the BPR visibility for your transparent shading. You can turn that down. Then you can also, under the render settings, you can go in here and you could say under transparency, you can play around with the strength and the N factor, C factor, refraction, and refractor. And that'll kind of give you a little bit of a thing. Hey Mike, you still use Houdini. How do you feel about it still? I still love it. I wish I used it more. It's certainly, I mean, I use it as more of just a production tool for like rapid iteration, but you know, I could use it for so much more than that. It's just kind of the time I have allotted to me. That's kind of all I've been able to use it for. But you know, it's an excellent, just like ZBrush, it's an excellent tool to either just work in, or it's an excellent tool to supplement other programs as well. I don't like, oh, another thing too, you know, bubbles kind of cast shadows a little bit, so you can turn on BPR shadows, and then that'll cast a little bit of shadows here. Now, that might be a little much. Let's see if that helps it any. Oof. Okay, so unfortunately, when we do flat shadows, it looks like it's S shadows either on or off. So I wonder if we go in here to render, turn off flat shadow, if that gives us a little bit more control. Ooh, it doesn't look like it. Yeah, I think when we were going through and doing these filters, if we turn all these off, no, it should, oh, another thing we can do. You just drag out and select this material. Let's go through and we'll make this material pop a little bit more. So diffuse all the way up. We can crank that specular up as well, and then that specular curve, we can tighten that up or broaden it out if we want to. But yeah, that shadow. Pure shadow at 0. That turns it off, but you should be able to just crank it up to 100. It's on, but you can't do like 20%. I wonder why that is. I wonder maybe because maybe vibrant? Does that affect it? Nope. I really don't know. Looks like I broke something. But you should be able to control how much of that BPR shadow shows up, but it looks like it's just off or on, which, I don't know, maybe not ideal. But, okay, so, how much time we got left? Okay, we got some time. Are we allowed to use triangles when we retopologize for protection? I see you use them often. I use triangles all the time. If you're doing deformations, you want to make sure you don't put triangles in areas where you're like on the corners of mouths or eyeballs or anything that deforms a lot. Try and keep your triangles away from there. But if they're hidden, or if there's something like the back top of your head where you're not deforming anything, then they're fine. It's not a deal breaker. And really just not having triangles just makes it so that your mesh deforms in a little bit more of a predictable way at the end of the day. Hey Michael, when I align my images, I get a bunch of components I don't know what to do with. Oh, that's photogrammetry stuff. Z modeler. Sorry. Oh, not sure what that's referring to. When I hit Control Z, it undoes my mesh, not my snapshot 3D. Is there a reason for this? So, if you are new to ZBrush 2019, you'll probably like this feature, which is initialize QCube. And then we can go hit the comma key here, and we're going to go into Spotlight. And we're going to grab some of these Spotlight little things over here. So with this, we can actually grab this, or if I want to just duplicate a copy of this thing out, we can go through here, and we can use Spotlight. We can snap to these little areas here, and we can go ahead and scale these out. And then we can hold down Shift and move these things down, and we can rotate them around if we want to. Then we can start using these as Boolean. So if I want to like chop this out, first you probably want to have light Boolean turned on. And if we have Subtool open, you can see what it's doing. We can do a snapshot, hold down Alt, and then we can do Shift Z to turn that off, and that just cuts right through the mesh. But what it's doing, we turn light Boolean off, it's just making another mesh that's just slightly big enough to cut through, and then gives it a subtractive mesh. So if we hit W, transpose all, we can just scale both of these down. And then if we turn light Boolean back on, you can see we still have control over how exactly this is Booleaning out. So we can kind of play with this a little bit. And then hit Z again. And then if we want to swap this out, you can go on this one here, and it's like, okay, now I want to play with this mesh. And then it'll just go ahead and swap through these as needed. You can also just grab it's like a circle here, and we can do extending and vertically and horizontally, all that cool stuff. But again, we can just kind of rotate this out like so. And then we can move this around if we want to. If we want to snap this to the middle, we can. And then again, we can hold down Alt, and then we can punch this through. Now, because this one was selected, it punched through the exact same depth as the other one. If you wanted to punch through the entire object, we'll go ahead and delete that. We can select this object here. And if you also moved your camera, whoops, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to move our camera. So if we let's see, select this, go to the middle there. If you did move your camera around, so if you had Z and then you were like, oh shoot, I want to snap back, you could always save your camera views in the movie, but underneath your document now, not your document, your draw menu, you have more camera options. This is a real camera, so you have different millimeter focal lengths, and you can also just click, where do I cycle through? Oh, undo. So you can undo the camera back to where you were. So now, and you can assign hotkeys to that as well. So now I can punch through that entire object here. If we do Alt snapshot, right? Or am I crazy? My Boolean's on. This one is selected. We can union this. We can frame it. I don't know what just happened here. That's weird. Really bizarre. Snapshot 3D. It just doesn't want to do anything. Let me see. Spotlight. Let's try this again. Give me one of these. I might have accidentally hit something. So while I'm in, the whole point of this was while I'm doing this, and then I rotated it and I scaled it up a little bit, and I moved it around. I'm like, oh, I didn't want to do any of that. You should be able to hit Control Z, and it'll just undo back through Spotlight, and then you can not mess around with your. So it's a Spotlight undo, not a ZBrush undo. So if I hold down Alt now, okay, now it's snapping through. Interesting. So let's go back up here. Let's turn our Spotlight back on. Let's go ahead and turn this on, and we'll go ahead and grab, what am I looking for here? We'll put this one here. So now we've got this shape here, and we'll go ahead and snap it here and snap it here, and we'll rotate this 90 degrees and we'll scale it up. So if I want to cut this through, we now have this one selected, so I hold down Alt and cut through. Now it's going to cut through the entire object because whatever you have selected is what it's going to cut through. And then you can scale this down and scale it back out if we want to, or in, like so. And then of course you can use ZRemesher to go ahead and give you nice topology for these kind of zany shapes that you're making. So anyway, yeah, the whole point of that was you should be able to go through here and then start hitting Control Z to undo. But I think it's just maybe the active session. So like if I move this around and start doing some stuff, it'll remember this. So if I do Control Z, it'll undo through here. But if I turn it off, Shift Z, and then Z to turn it back on again, no, I'm still undoing. Or maybe if you're in Z and you Control Z, okay, yeah, so you need to be in widget mode for undos to work in Spotlight. If you're in Spotlight, but you're in like draw mode, it's not going to work. One thing that's kind of interesting is if we go ahead and do a Boolean, make Boolean mesh, and then we go ahead and say Dynamesh here. Go ahead and Dynamesh a little slightly higher resolution. We have a Dynamesh here. If you have a Spotlight here and you do Dynamesh, it'll actually go through and just Dynamesh slice. So just be careful when you're using this and you're using Dynamesh. That's a feature to go ahead and say, cut all that stuff out. It'll just go through and slice that with your Dynamesh. Do you know how to get an 8mm or Super 16 lens with the new physical camera? I've had such issues getting the lens with high distortion amount. It should work fine except for this auto crop status, which I'm not sure if I'm capturing that or not. Just above, where next to your quick save, there's an AC button. That's going to ensure that when you're exporting that the focal lengths will work correctly. When you're zoomed in, it'll kind of mess around with the focal lengths. That might be something to do with it, but I'm not positive on the camera stuff. Is it possible to sculpt on an extracted subtool like for armor pieces? Yeah, for sure. So let's go ahead and we can make some armor in this guy real quick. So let's say, what am I looking for here? Let's take this little gross goopy guy. And you know what, let's just do delete other. We'll pare this down a little bit. So now, if we turn off the floor and we're going through here, we turn on X symmetry, and it's like, okay, I want to put some armor plating on this guy. So one option you can do is you can go through here and you can just kind of paint some armor on him. Now, if you do an extraction on this, it's going to have a bunch of details built in. I might suggest just duplicating this off and then just going through here and dynameshing him. And then maybe even going in here and doing maybe, let's hit Control W, make it all in polygroup. I'm going to do a polish by features just because I don't need all of that extraneous information. In an extraction, I don't need a bunch of stuff for my extraction to do stuff. So anyway, if we wanted to put like a little piece of armor here, you can go through here and then we can hold down Control Alt, and then this will be my armor piece. I like to have a little bit more control. So what I'll do is instead of doing extraction, because I just have to do more work essentially, so we can do an extraction. It's like, oh, I extracted some geometry off, so we can accept it, and then we can unmask this. So now we have an extraction here, but you know the corners are kind of crummy, so you can go through here and you can do a polish by features, and you can just use that to kind of smooth your lines out. But probably, I mean, you could also do this. You could go through, and if you was like, okay, I want to keep this corner a little bit tighter, so we're going to say crease edge. So we can kind of crease this edge here, and okay, that's a nice solid sweep, and we'll crease this edge back here just to kind of show you the difference. So now when I do polish by features, we'll do open circle under your deformation menu, and now when we do this, this will give me a little bit more armory look, but the interior geometry is still garbage. It's still just Dynamesh stuff. We can make it thicker, QMesh polygroup all, and then we can just hold down Shift and pull along that surface normal. You can also do that, and then if you have creases in here, you can always remember you can go back here to geometry crease, and you can say hold down Control, and you can pop in some bevels here if you want to. But as far as like sculpting on an extract, and all you would need to do is just start sculpting. Or at this point, you could also just dynamesh this result and start sculpting. So you'd want to dynamesh at a higher resolution to maintain your details. And then you can go in here to like, let's say brush, Hardschaft alphas, and we'll say base shapes here. We can go through here and we can put in some, let's take that intensity down. Now, if you are going through an object, you want to make sure sometimes that underneath your brush settings, if you have a thinner object, you go down here to auto masking, turn on backface mask. So now when I pull out here, it's going to leave this one alone. So now you can kind of pop this in. However, probably what I would do, instead of using extraction, I would go all the way back here. Oops, I guess I just delete this, can't I? I'll go all the way back here. I'm going to duplicate this guy off, and all of this I can just cut out if I go through here and I do geometry edge loop mask border. And now I have an object that I didn't do a great job, but again, we can go through here. If you just want to smooth these edges out, you can go down here to masking, mask border, control tab to invert that, and then we can just do a polish by features. You get nice smooth lines. However, even at this point, I would be inclined to just do ZRemesh half depth size down to 0 and just get better geometry. And then I could tell ZRemesh, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and move these points in. I want this to be pointy down here, so I'm going to pull this down to an angle. And I'm just going to kind of guide ZRemesher into what I want here. And then, you know what? Let's go ahead and make this pointy too, just to show you. And then I can do ZRemesh half. And I'm just getting nicer geometry to work with. So now this is much more usable armor geometry. So now I can go through here and QMesh polygroup all, and we can pop this out, and then we can even pull along that surface normal if we want to. And now you have a lot more options available to you if you wanted to, like, say, put a lip on that, or go through here and like poke a hole through, and then we can just do crease dynamic. You know, so armor like this, a little bit more usable. Then of course you can always dynamesh this result and make it whatever you want to kind of go through and mess around with. So let's do a crease tolerance on this one. And then if we wanted to smooth these things out, we could also go back in here. Let's do a mask by border, and then we'll just do a polish by features, just to kind of make that a little more armory, because it's kind of lumpy. So now when we do D for dynamic subdivisions, we can do crease 3 and 4. And then we can go through here, and it's just a lighter envelope here, so we could just pull around these fewer points and still maintain a fairly nice shape. In fact, we can even make this even lower. With ZRemesh, we can say keep our creases, and that'll make sure that we maintain those. And now we have even fewer points here. Very, very smooth armor look. You can go through here and just kind of massage those out a little bit. How to avoid normal seams when baking might be the cause besides a sharp edge in the high res. Is there a good source material on this you recommend? At work we do. So apply to certain affinity, and I can walk you through all of our game res best practices that'll hopefully make it so that you don't have a whole bunch of normal seams. A lot of that might be in your surface normals, your vertex normals when you're baking to a low res. If your UVs and your surface normals aren't correct, you can get seams across there. So yeah, that would be like your high res could be perfectly smooth, but it's really your low res that's causing those seams. And it might just be a vertex normal issue or a UV issue, or maybe both. Can you use the new alpha stamps Boolean feature in conjunction with deformers? So yeah, you should be able to. So for example, it's like, okay, we've got this, and if I'm just going to be working on one side, I'm going to go ahead and say delete this. In fact, if you want to go ahead and flip this around and just have one working side and keep your file sizes even lower, you can go over here to array mesh. You can say, let's make a new array mesh here, and we can go, I'm going to reset it, and we're going to do a mirror. Where is it at? X mirror. And oh, wait, reset. Mirror on the X. No. Okay, let's think about this. I want to do, I mean, I guess I could manually just go through and like offset it over to the side here. What was that, -3? But that's not ideal. Because now what I can do You should be able to just mirror in the X. I'm probably doing something wrong, being dumb. But this way, but yeah, it should be. Oh, you know what? Let's try this. Let's say lock position, lock size, reset X mirror. There we go. Do that. And then now when you go through here and you update this one, the other one will update on the fly. And if you want to just turn that off, you can just turn off array mesh. Anyway, back to the question. If we go in here and, okay, we're going to use Spotlight. We're going to go through here and we're going to cut some hard surface stuff in here. So we're going to hit Z. We're going to Boolean some stuff out. You know, you can always use insert mesh brushes, honestly, if you're just going to kind of cut stuff in. I would probably still be more inclined to use insert mesh brushes, but these are interesting as well. So we're going to do Z. We're going to kind of position this, and let's say, you know what, I want to punch this one through here. This is a cool shape. So we're going to go through and grab these ones, and we're going to scale it down, rotate it down a little bit, and maybe we'll just put it over here in the corner. So with this one, we want to make sure that this one is selected, and then we want to turn on live Boolean. Then we don't have to do this. It just so you can see the result, we can hold down Alt and punch it through, and then that goes ahead and punches through this. Now, it is going to punch through everything, so you can make a folder system, or you can just make a new start group here, so that it just punches through this object. So now we have a Boolean. So if you want to use a deformer on this, now I don't think you can use a deformer like, oh, I want to do a lattice deformer on this, so if I go here, and I'm like, can I take this stop sign, and can I like taper this? I don't think you can do that. But that's not a huge deal because you can always just turn into geometry and taper it after the fact. So if you want to like maybe punch this through, it's like, okay, we punched that through, but now I want to taper this one. This would just be a matter of holding down Alt. We can align it to this, let's align it to this face here, and we'll go to Unmatched Mesh Center, and then now we can go in here and do a taper deformer or a deformer. This might actually be better. Let's do. Can I get? I want to maintain that. I mean, I guess I can just manually something like this. So anyway, we can go through here and we can do a deformer, and then we can drop these down. And then if I want to taper this end here, we can just go through and we can like taper this down. And you can see the result of that too. If you wanted to just kind of shrink this down on this side or pull this in. So if you wanted to like punch through but also have it taper slightly as it went through, you can always do it after the fact, after it's geometry. But yeah, not as an alpha. But that's not, again, that's not a huge deal because once it is geometry, you're free to do whatever you want to with that geometry as a live Boolean. Hey everybody, thanks for showing up. How do you go about making Veroni type perforated surface like an architectural facade does in Rhino Grasshopper? Woo! Boy, those are some words I'm going to have to look up. Veroni, is that like a noise type? Veronoi. Oh, yeah. Okay, now I see like breaking up or shattering something. That kind of stuff I would do in Houdini. They have, I assume that's what you're talking about. I'm not super well versed in that. That I'm not positive. I have a Max asks, I have a head attached to a body. The head is cut in half horizontally. So it's attached to a body and it's cut in half horizontally. Okay. And the two halves are filled with a material. How can I make the head and only the head, not the body, hollow? You can use live Booleans or you can use the shell system. Let's try. You know what? Yeah, let's do this. This will be a little bit easier, and it'll clear out our space here. So we have a head, and we want it split in half horizontally. So we can go ahead and like slice this. And then if we turn on groups with our Dynamesh, and we Control-Shift-Drag, you can see that it's just going to keep our top half and our bottom half here. So if you wanted to just hollow out one side, again, you could do like a split hidden, and then you could duplicate this off. And then, you know what? It might actually even be easier to, yeah, I mean, I would like to use ZRemesh for that, actually. Let's do this. So, trying to think of the most elegant way to go about this. Essentially, we want to slice this in half, but have two separate pieces, and then hollow out one side. Um, so, and again, there's a couple different ways to do this. However, let's hold down Control Shift, and if we do a slice, I do want to maintain that group. So we do have groups turned on, but I want to have a different polygroup for that bottom side. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to split. Isolate this, and we'll just do like split hidden, and then I'm just going to do a quick close holes operation on both sides here. And then even for both of these, I'm going to do a quick mirrored weld because the close holes operation is not mirrorable. So now on this one here, I can duplicate this off, and I'm actually going to, if you go into solo mode here, I'm going to zero mesh. I'm going to say crease PG. I'm going to zero mesh and tell it half detect keep creases, and then zero mesh. Actually, let's turn that adaptive size down. And the reason I'm doing this is this is going to give me a little bit more control over. So now essentially I can use this as a Boolean mesh. So if I go through here and I say QMesh polygroup all, and I just pull this in, that's the thickness it's going to be. And then if I go down here and I just pull this down, now we'll have a live Boolean mesh here. So if we turn this on, so now I'm getting a thickness. So again, I can go back through here and just say, you know what, I want a little bit more thick. So there we go, we got a little shell thickness. And this just gives you the nicer result. You can use, like I said before, the shell function, but this one's a little bit less predictable. So if we turn off groups and we dynamesh this, you can go down here, any primitive you plug in, if you make it a subtractive mesh, and we'll go ahead and turn on double-sided so you can see it. So we want to, you know, slice this out, and then under your dynamesh properties, what am I looking for here? Go in your dynamesh properties here, you can say create a shell and add a shell thickness. So I think if we dynamesh this now, create a shell, yeah. So now if we hit, actually let's do this. Let's go to append, cube, hit W, go out of solo mode here, we make this subtractive. Now you can see, you know, it is giving you a hollow shell through here, but like I said, it's unpredictable. You may have to go in here and polish polygroup borders. You've got to slice this part off. It's just easier just to use Booleans. You can also just like use deformations and zero. If you have a dynamesh and then you bring it back in, you can use deformation to just kind of deflate and use it as a live Boolean as well. But I don't know. Live Boolean is your best bet, probably. Cool. Yeah, I mean, you can send it to me, but you know, anything I'm trying to hollow out, I would just use live Booleans. That's your best bet. Cool. And yeah, and you can always put in. In fact, it's actually easier if you wanted to do a. Let's see. Let's load this up here. I mean, hell, you could even do a live Boolean at this point. So it's like, okay, I've got the head here, and if you want some, let's delete this thing here. If you want a space between the head, you could just move it down, or you could put in another live Boolean. If we go to append, whoops, not that. Or I guess you could use that actually. I was thinking this, and you could also use this as a live Boolean. So if you wanted to, you know, put a little separation in there, and then have the other part hollow, you know, it just gives you a little bit more control over your object there. Is it possible to choose a subtool as a light source? Ooh, in ZBrush? No. In Keyshot, yes. No, in ZBrush the lights, I don't think there is, but in ZBrush the lights are essentially just you don't really have, you can't just like click and rotate and remove them. You just go through and you move this little dot here. You can also tap this dot to send it around to the back. You can actually see this a little bit better if we go to a basic material here. So now if we tap here, it'll bring the light around to the front. And if you tap it, it'll send it around to the back. So, but yeah, I don't know of any direct access over the lights to kind of do that. Can you import an external camera from another DCC app? Yeah, I think as long as you use FBX, it should work. Does the low res need to be one single-sided envelope, or one subtool can have multiple shells? If on a low res, if I'm being frugal, it'll usually be a single-sided envelope. That usually works. If you have a one subtool as your low res mesh, you won't be able to use namespace baking, but if you don't care about that, that's not a big deal. And you can have as many shells as you want. If you're talking about UV shells, you can go crazy. On Z modeler brush options, insert point only adds the point on one selected polygon. Any possibility to add the point on all the polygons on the mesh? Ooh, that's a good one. Let's try that. Let's see what we can do there. So we got a plane here. And we're going to say make polymesh 3D. And we're going to go down to geometry. And we're going to reconstruct a couple times. And we're going to delete higher. So in here, insert point only adds the point on one of the selected polygons. So we can go through here and insert point, and we can click it, and that will insert a point. Now if we want to insert a point on every polygon here, insert point on a poly center, it doesn't have polygroup all, and really it's only one target. So really it would be, I wonder, because it would be not, yeah, I guess because if it had different targets, like, oh, I don't want it in the poly center, that would be a different target. But since it is only one target, it would make more sense to have the target be a polygroup definition. Yeah, because it would be nice to go, hey, you know what? I want to do all of these as insert point, but not have to do that. Is there a hacky workaround? That's the next question. If it doesn't just do it, can I think of a way to go, oh, that did it. Okay, so it only does it on a single poly. A hacky way to do it is, since these are all technically a single poly, quote unquote, you can paint it first, then tap. I mean, the problem is you have to paint your polygroup first, but it'll treat them all as a single poly. Maybe that's it. Now, if you wanted to do all the polygons in the mesh and you wanted to like paint everything very quickly, can you just do? It's just a single polygon paint. You'd have to go through and scrub all these, and then, well, found that by accident, but maybe that'll work for you. Cool. Thank you, Art and Time, for the kind words there. We're getting close to the end here. You can close a light cap when you're done with an object. It's still active. Don't want it to be active when I'm done with it. Oh, I'd have to research light cap a little bit more. It's been a while since I've actually used them. Fall asleep to my voice. Thank you. Setup Wizard cannot detect any installed. Oh yeah, send a ZBrush. If you have any major ZBrush like install issues, that is open up a ticket in Pixelogic. I wouldn't know anything about that. Cool. So yeah, not a whole lot of. How do you open that shortcut in ZBrush that shows the tools? Can you share it, please? It's not a shortcut. If I understand correctly what he's talking about, or she. If we go in here to our tool menu, we go to the demo soldier here, and so if you've got something with a lot of subtools, and you want to select them, obviously you can go over here to your subtools. You can also change your visible count now if you haven't checked that out. So you can go through here and you can see more of them. You can also hit the N key, and then you can just kind of go through and pick those. So, and you can also use this like a brush selection system. So if I hit N and then I narrow it down to G, that'll be all my G subtools, glove and goggles, and then O for my goggles. So that'll go, oh, of course, did it do it? N-G-O. Oh, it didn't do it. N-G-O. Select goggles, and it doesn't do it. Well, at least you can go NG, narrow it down, and then select goggles. So there's must be something broken. Cool, cool. If you have too many points in the scene and you already have changed in the memory the max amount of polys, how to use Sculptris Pro mode. If you do have a lot of polygons, actually, I have a video for that. If we go to my YouTube channel here, and we go to, so that was a ZBrush 2018, what's new. Inside of here, performance, maximizing Sculptris Pro performance here. Can I just send you this copy link address? This will be, long story short, if you have a bunch of details, but it's just like a very high res Dynamesh, just decimate it first, and then use Sculptris Pro to add geometry where you need it. So just keep decimating down to keep your point count underneath your max. That just makes it more responsive. Even if you were able to crank up your polygons more, your computer may kind of chug and make it not a very fun experience for you to use Sculptris Pro. So that's just a way to kind of keep your point count down, maintain your details, and then use Sculptris Pro to put your details where you need them. Oh, the import camera feature is broken. Well, in theory, you should be able to import cameras, but anyway, I'm going to call it a day. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully me going over a bunch of ZBrush stuff was useful to you. I'm going to try to stream more. I'm trying to get out of manager stuff. Well, manager stuff is what it is. I'm trying to get, again, those self-sustaining systems to self-sustain, and then I can hop back into a little bit of art. So, well, you can always rewatch the stream. I'm actually going to post the stream to my YouTube channel, so you can rewatch back what's already been on here. But also, I'm going to try to stream more. I'm going to try to stream this Thursday as well. So hit me up on my channel, twitch.tv/PavMike, and we'll do another stream on Thursday. So thanks again. See you guys Thursday, and have a good rest of your day.